Hello and welcome to Game Changers with me, Vicki Abelson, and my guest today is my good friend James Lee Stanley. Hi, James.
Hello, Vicki. You're
You know,
looking
I've
great.
oh wait, do you hear that doubling? It's doing it now. Oh my
No, I don't
God.
hear it.
Okay. Oh, thank you. So are you.
I'm holding up. I've been pretty lucky, you know.
You know, James, you are amazing. I can't find why this is doing this. So,
Uh, what's it doing, Vicki?
okay, here we go. I never know if I am supposed to call you James or James Lee, and I do both.
You do.
What is proper?
Uh, I only use James Lee Stanley because a numerologist told me that I would have the safest spiritual success if I use my full name. She said, if you use Jim Stanley, you have a good chance of going down a very dark road and not getting back. And I said, well, in that case, I'll use my whole name. I mean, and she said that would be the safest way to go. So that's what I did. And my name really is James Lee Stanley, but I go by James. I've been going by James for 50 years.
You know, I love that story. I don't know. I don't know if you know my friend Zoe Moon. She's an astrologer, and she's given me tips on. I've had tips on things like that. My name used to be Vicki Keats, and she said if you use that name, you will never go anywhere. So I changed my name, and I still haven't gone anywhere. But you know what the hell? It's, oh my God.
Actually, you know what? There's really nowhere to go.
Well,
That's the reality of it. I figured this out. Here's what we can do when we're involved in the entertainment industry, if you will.
if you
We have a choice all the time of being an artist or being a celebrity. Sometimes they
Ah,
combine. Sometimes they combine. Neil Young is an artist and a celebrity.
mm,
But many people are either a celebrity or an artist. And I realized as I they just did a documentary on me. Gary J. Katz, who did a documentary on Badfinger for Apple, and he did Humble Pie and Steve Marriott for A&M, and he did Manasseh. Anyhow, he came to me and he said he wanted to do a documentary on me, and I laughed and said, well, I mean, sure, but my parents are already gone, so who are you going to sell it to? You know. But he felt there was a story there, and I'll show it to you. It's what did I do with it?
what did you do with it,
Oh,
James?
here it is. It's called The Opening Act, and we've got it in like about 15 film festivals now, and we're waiting to see what happens next. And anyhow, while doing the documentary, we did it for 2 years, and I got every famous friend I ever had to to do an interview. But in any event, going through my life, I realized that I always opted for being an artist. I kind of assumed foolishly that if you work as an artist, the celebrity will come. But it turns out that that's a separate, almost a separate career. You got to work at that really hard, and I have never worked at it. I just have worked at songwriting and singing and recording and performing. And
I know.
so I get so and you've been doing what you've been doing all this time. You've always been you, so far as since I've known you. You've been so
I've only
consistently
been
you.
me.
Yeah, but that's that. You know how tricky that is, because most people aren't. you know.
Yeah, I think that's true. And, you know, they always say that if you do what you love, the money will follow. That has yet to happen to me, James. That's not,
I'm not sure that's true.
no, that is, that I don't know I don't know what's going on with that, but I love the fact that you listen to the spiritual wisdom and use that name. And it really suits you though. It really does.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of used to it after 50 years.
So tell me, how did the documentary come to be? Now Katz was my maiden name, by the way, when I was born. So
I had
maybe
no
we're
idea.
related. How did Gary come to you? What was the circumstance?
Evidently, Gary was a fan of my music, unbeknownst to me, and because his name is Gary Katz, he's also a musician. He put together a little band, and he came up here to Bear Valley Springs, where I live,
Uh-huh.
and one night his band was going to play at the country club, and I saw the name Gary Katz. So I emailed him and I said, "Are you the Gary Katz that is my favorite record producer of all the Steely Dan records?" Because Gary Katz produced the Steely Dan. He said, "No, I'm Gary J. Katz."
Aha.
Oh, that's right. But I do play music. And that's when I found that he was playing. And I said, "Well, I'll come down to the club and hear you." So I went down there and heard his set, and sat in with him. And about a week later, he called up and he said, "You know what, man? I've been doing a lot of Googling you and stuff." And he said, "I'd like to do a documentary on you." And I said,
Wow.
I can't imagine who would care, but I'm very flattered.
Oh,
So then we started, and it took about 2 years. And once the pandemic hit, people like Steven Wright and Mike Kappas from Rosebud Music and Fred Bolander from Monterey Peninsula Artists. These are like huge agencies. They actually did the selfie interviews and sent them to us because
oh,
they were so sweet. Everybody was so sweet to me. Tom Robbins did one with it just on his phone. So we'd
fantastic.
have it. It was pretty remarkable that it made me feel great, to know that I had. Well, I haven't got the large bucks. I do have a lot of peer respect and a lot of dear
Yes, you do.
friends, in the biz.
So is it primarily a COVID selfie documentary?
No, not at all. We had pictures, and we had a year of shooting before the COVID started. So there's just a couple of interviews that are, that are phone interviews, and it starts. I mean, this is story of my whole life, and how I started recording it at I think 16, and I've done it my whole life. And then he said, "I want to hear a lot of these stories." So there's a whole lot of little anecdotes, that have happened to me through the years, opening up for Art Garfunkel or Chicago or Steven Wright or Robin Williams or Bill Cosby or Nicolette Larson or Bonnie Raitt. I mean, I open up for everybody you can imagine, from Ed McMahon to the Persuasions.
No, you didn't open up for Ed McMahon.
Yeah, I did, in someplace, Moscow, Idaho.
What the hell did Ed McMahon do as a headliner?
I don't know. I was a single man then, so I left with somebody after I played. I used to be easy, Vicki.
I can't even imagine what the hell Ed McMahon did for an hour and a half to entertain people.
Well, I remember there was one of the guys from
Sure, just weird.
one of the comedians from that show, Barney Miller. He had curly hair and glasses. I forget his name, but I did a show with him, and I said, "How long do you want me to play?" And he said, "How about 20 minutes?" And I said, "Well, okay." So I did 20 minutes. He did 45 minutes. That was the whole show. So people don't feel, when I do a concert by myself, it takes about 3 hours,
Yeah.
For one thing, I've got 35 albums, and if anybody asks for anything, I like to be able to do any song from any album, so.
Oh, okay. Well, this is not Steve. It wasn't Steve Landisberg, was it?
Yes.
Oh, it is. Okay, Linda, thank you. A few people came up with it. Carolyn. Yeah,
Steve Landisberg was it. One of the few people I never got to be friends with.
Is that true? He was very funny back in the day.
Yeah, he was a funny dude, but he wasn't available.
Uh-huh. I actually waited on him at Maxwell's Plum in the 70s. He lived across the street. He was very fun. All right. So you said you'll play anything at any time from any. I'm not going to call out a request. I'm going to let you play what you plan. But how about bringing us in with some music?
Sure. Actually, I have a brand new song.
Into this.
Your new song is your new baby, so I'd like to start with that one, if it's all right.
I would love that, James.
Let me plug in. I accidentally left the guitar plugged in since our 3 o'clock sound check, so I was afraid the battery would go. So I've been unplugging it when I'm not using it. You hear that?
I do.
Okay, this goes there, this goes there, that goes there. And they say she keeps her heart in amber, and you can look, but you can't touch. A well-known secret as clear as crystal. A diamond in the dust. She keeps her heart in amber. And amber knows when anyone is watching. And amber knows not a soul can see where she's been or where she's going. Is she chained or is she free? She keeps her heart in amber. She keeps her heart in amber. If there are stars in her skies, how could she see them from where her heart lies? Even if all of those stars were in her eyes, could she even free them? And once you know, she keeps her heart in amber, even though it's hidden in plain sight. Once you find it, you cannot keep it. Could you steal the darkness from the night? She keeps her heart in amber. There you go.
Oh, what a gentle exit from that song there,
Well, you know
James Lee.
what? I forgot the last verse, so I just stopped. Actually, I just remembered. It goes, over
Go ahead.
time, our cries become a whisper. And over time, our skin becomes so thin. And over time, our hearts become bone china. We break so easily then. We keep our hearts in amber. We keep our hearts in amber. That's the real end.
We break so easily then. What a beautiful song. What is that called, James Lee?
It's called Hearts in Amber.
Hearts in Amber. Beautiful song.
Thank you.
I'm writing that down so I don't forget.
Good.
Okay, so wait, you were going to say something. What?
No, I just said good.
Oh,
That you
yes,
were writing it down.
I'm writing it down because I love that.
Yeah, I got the idea from that. You ever see those pictures of little insects that are inside of amber from like a million
Sure.
years ago?
Uh-huh.
When I saw them, I just immediately thought about the fact that all of us protect our hearts in such a cautious way. You know, I mean, to fall in love is to take away the protection, is to open your heart, and most of us have a hard time doing that. That's what I got the idea of hearts in amber. You know, and I thought that
love that.
most of us protect our hearts most of the time.
So you've been married for quite some time. How long have you been married, James Lee?
This is my third wife, my favorite of the bunch, and it's been at least 35 years, I think.
Okay, so those first two marriages, I'm guessing, were kind of short-lived.
2 years and 6 months to the day, twice.
Get out of here. Exactly the same amount of time, 2 times?
Yeah, I seem to have an expiration date when I was younger. I don't know.
And how did you meet the wife that matters?
Oh, you know what? She was working with a man named Matthew McCauley, who produced America, and
Mhm.
Matthew was producing a band called the Coyote Sisters, which was Renee Armand and Leah Kunkel and one other girl whose name slips my mind momentarily. Anyhow,
Okay.
he was producing them, and they were playing live at my place in Santa Monica. Remember Matt Kramer's joint? So I went down there. Stephen Bishop and I went down there to see Leah because she's a dear friend of both of ours.
Mhm.
And I met Evelina that night, and I asked her out. I remember the next day when I went to pick her up for the date, uh, she was staying at Matthew's house. She just graduated from college, and she came to America just to get away from Holland. She's Dutch, and she was working as his au pair. And so I felt a little strange, but she was, 23 years old, so it wasn't like she was 16 or something. But in any event, I walked in the door, and Matthew's wife said, "Oh, James, wouldn't it be amazing if you fell in love and got married?" And I said, "Tammy, relax. It's our first date. Back off."
Wow.
Except we fell in love and got married.
So how long after your 2-year, 6-month second marriage was this?
Let's see, 13 years.
Oh, okay. So you had time to breathe
Oh
and
yeah, I did more than breathing.
yeah.
Yeah, I was. I replaced my second wife with every other woman I ever met.
Wow.
I just became quite enamored. Distracted, I guess is a better word.
Well, that's
Yeah,
good that you sowed all those wild oats so that you were kind of ready to do
yeah. As it happened, that's probably where I got the HPV. That the cancer virus.
which impacted you how?
Well, it turns out you get HPV mostly from oral genital contact,
Yes.
and as reflecting back, I realized that I don't think I missed anyone. So statistically I was due, and it turned up that I had a tumor on the back of my tongue, a huge thing, and so they had to go down with a robot and slice that out, and they had to take margins around it to make sure there was no cancer vestiges in there anywhere. I was fortunate in that it was on top of my tongue instead of in my tongue or under my tongue like I was with Peter Tork or with Michael Douglas. In any event, and Timothy Schmidt too. Uh, they cut it out, and then they said they thought it was wise to go down my throat, and they cut a big flap here, and they took out 62 lymph nodes, and they said, "You probably won't sing for a year." And I said, "Well, I've got a show." This was like November the 8th. And I said, "Well, I have a show on January the 4th, and I'm not canceling it." And and I did it, and it's on the internet. I did it at Kulak's. I sang for an hour, and it came out
I
just great.
remember when, okay, so how did you discover that this was going on?
Really weird, Vicky. I was having because of my advanced age, I was having another colonoscopy, and my wife said, "Why don't you get a endoscopy while you're at it?" So it was like a musician on a spit there, camera at each end, and and when they went down my throat, they annoyed that tumor, and then I started having problems which I'd never had before.
Wait, you mean they didn't see it? That they
No,
just,
no, the camera they shoot the camera down into your stomach,
right,
and they weren't really looking at the base of my tongue. I mean, I don't think anybody even had the camera on at that point. They were sliding it in. In any
right.
event, if they had not irritated it, then I would never have known. And at some point, I would have had such a big tumor that they would have had to take out my tongue or something. So it was ridiculously fortuitous that she wanted me to have a endoscopy. And so I went to the doctor, and he said, "Well, you have a dark spot. I think it's cancer." And I said, "So how long do I?" Because Peter had just died, and Peter Tork had just died in February, and I said, "Well, how long do I have?" And he said, "Well, I don't know. Let's go." So they gave me a whole bunch of tests, and then I had the operation, and then I've been going every 3 months, and there's been no return. I've been really blessed. and I didn't have to have radiation or chemo. I
Well,
lost my
how
hair
long
on
ago?
my own.
how
I did
how
it
long
myself.
how long ago was this that you had the surgery, James?
November of 2019.
It's absolutely miraculous. And you were singing 2 months later.
I was, but you know what? I discovered that the scar tissue began to harden, and it turns out you use all kinds of muscles in your neck when you're singing, of which I was unaware. 'Cause I've sung all my life, so I didn't. I've never taken a lesson, so I didn't really know how it worked. I just knew that it
Right.
did work, you know.
Right.
And and it started stiffening up. So I went to a therapist, and he gave me some exercises to do. But truthfully, my voice over the past 2 years has been my range started to get limited, and my control wasn't really. And the pandemic didn't help because you don't sing in practice like you do when you're on stage, you
Of
know.
course.
So I had a year and a half of practicing here in the studio, but not doing that real projecting showbiz thing. But 2 weeks ago, I started back on the road. I went up and I played in Mendocino, and I played in Sacramento and in uh, Oakland, and then I came home for a couple of days, and then I went out and played in Ojai. So I did 4 dates in about 7 days. Sunday, I played the Sculptera Vineyard, and Vicky, it was unbelievable. For the first time since my operation, my voice just opened up. I
I,
sang, I sang everything I could do anything I've ever done with my voice again, finally. And then
wow.
today, I didn't even warm up. This is just
I
the
was
way
going to
it
say you
sounded.
sounded perfect. You sounded exactly like you, exactly as I've always heard you sound. It's
I don't
incredible.
know how it happened, but it opened up, and now I mean I was actually afraid because when I did the shows in Ojai where I sang, I mean I sang well, but it wasn't effortless. My singing has always been effortless, and all of a sudden, you know, I had to like watch every note. Going for high notes was like walking on thin ice. You put a foot out there. Can I stand? You know, will this work? You know what I mean?
Wow.
But and so I thought last weekend, 2 weekends ago, I thought, you know what? If I can't do everything that I did with my voice, I'm going to stop doing it. I don't want to be one of those guys that goes out there and can't do what he did, you know, and sticks around anyhow. You know, the guy that
Right.
stays after the party's over. You know, I
Oh,
don't want to do
yeah.
that.
We've
But
all
then,
seen some of those guys.
oh yeah, but then
Yeah.
Sunday, just a couple of days ago, I sang my ass off. It was so fun to be me. You
Wow.
know, very
It
gratifying.
was so fun to be me.
Well, it was.
I love it. I love it. You sounded spectacular just now. And people are
Thanks.
saying on the thread that your voice is you have just an incredible voice. It was
I have
wonderful.
a
It's
nice
wonderful to
voice.
hear.
My whole
Thank
family
you.
does. My sisters are the real talent in the family. You should hear them sing. They're
Okay,
unbelievable.
so tell us about your family. I remember some of your background, but where did you grow up, James? And were your parents musical? And
No, my father played the piano and wrote poetry, and my mother sang all the time. And my grandfather actually had a band and played the piano and he played
wow.
any instrument. And so I did come from a musical family, and all my sisters sing. And my sister Robin was in Expose for a couple of years. That girl group.
Right.
And my sister Sandra uh, went way deep into the church uh, and became a gospel singer. And actually Vicky, she actually goes to Israel to save Jews for Jesus. I, I, I tried to point out to her how silly that was, but she didn't get it. You know, so and actually, all my sisters have become very, very religious and very right wing and very. They all support Trump, so I haven't actually spoken to them since the election.
Where did you grow up, James?
Virginia.
Well, hello. What do you expect? I mean, this is
Yeah, but I mean, I was born in Pennsylvania, and then we lived in Africa, and I've lived in North Carolina, I've lived in Texas, and I've lived mostly in California. Most of my life I spent here. You know.
as a child as well.
No, no, I came
Oh,
here. I came here to go to the Defense Language Institute because it was in the Air Force, and they decided I would be a Chinese linguist. So I had to go up to Monterey and study Chinese. You remember we did that thing at the Henry Miller,
yes, we did.
yeah, Cow. What was that?
Henry Miller Library in
Big
Monterey,
Sur.
in Big Sur. Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. That was really fun.
that was really fun. And it was so great because you had that connection. Mike Nesmith, for those of you that don't know, produced that show. And James Lee was partners with Peter Tork for many years. You did 3
Yeah,
albums
I met
together.
Peter way before the Monkees.
Okay, so
I
how did you meet Peter?
met him at a club in Virginia Beach. He was playing the banjo behind a trio of three black guys who had left the Harry Belafonte singers and become their own group, and they hired Peter to play the banjo, and they hired Lance Wakely to play the guitar. So the two of them were the backing band, you know. And Peter
And
and
so
I
you
hit it
guys,
off instantly, and we started singing. They were there for 2 weeks, and every Monday the club had an open mic night, and they got there, played the first week. The second week before they started, there was open mic night, and Peter and I worked up an act and played that, and that was in 1964. Matter of fact, we saw
wow.
Hard Day's Night together
Oh my
in Virginia
God.
Beach. We came out of there so electrified, you know.
That's so crazy. So you were already friends when he auditioned for the Monkees, and
Oh yeah, we were friends for yeah 3 or 4 years by then. Yeah.
so he had this massive superstardom, and yet you guys stayed musically connected as well as friend
Well, you know,
connected.
it's funny because of the Air Force. I was sent to Taiwan, and I truly missed the entire Monkees phenomenon. And so when I came back, I mean, I knew that Peter had gotten famous in the Monkees, but I didn't have any Monkees records, and I didn't ever see the show. And I really was. I have to tell you, it was his death that brought home to me how famous he was, because
What?
he's been my friend for so long that I didn't realize that he's like. I mean, if I'd known how world famous he was, I would have put a lot. I produced his solo album. I would have put a lot more famous people on that record if I'd known he knew him. You know, I was just helping my pal when I made the record. I didn't know that he, you know, Steve Stills. I mean, you know, all these people loved. Steve Stills is the one that got him his interview. He said he called him twice. Go down
Get
there.
out of here.
Yeah, Steven went and auditioned, and they turned him down because they didn't like the way his teeth were or something. And so he called, and he and Peter had the same hairdo and the same mutton chop sideburns.
Right.
So he called Peter, who was washing dishes at the Golden Bear, and he said, Peter, you should go up and audition for this. Peter said, yeah, okay. And then he didn't. So Steven called him again and said, man, I'm telling you, you got a shot here. Go up there and do it. So Peter went up there, auditioned, and got the gig. So anyhow,
Wow.
I came back from Taiwan, and I came down here, and I came down here to go to school because LACC had a fantastic music program, and I could afford it, you know. So I started going to school, and I played McCabe's, and Peter came. But now he was a math teacher in Venice or something, and you know, I just didn't really get it, you know. And then years later, when the Monkees reformed and he started playing, and everybody put out an album. I mean, they all had solo albums, and I said,
Right.
Peter, why don't you have a solo album? And he, you know, he was such a modest dude. He said, well, you know, no one asked me. And I said, Peter, I have a studio. I have a record label. I have national distribution. I'll tell you what, let's make a record. Let's try to sell it to somebody. And if, you know, we can't get the money we want for it, we can put it on our own label. So we can't lose. And so we made a record together called Stranger Things Have Happened, his only first real solo album.
Right.
And as we were finishing it, he said, James, I don't want to shop the record. I want to put it on your label. So Peter signed to my label just out of friendship.
Wow.
There was no
Wow.
advance, you know. As a matter of fact, I
Wow.
charged him to produce him.
Wow. What a
Yeah,
lovely story.
he was a great man. And I have to tell you, when we were on the road, we would go, and every place we played was sold out. And I booked all the dates because I don't know, because I've always booked the dates.
Right.
So I booked all the dates for the two of us, and he demanded that he wanted me to take 20% for booking. And I said, Peter, no, you have to take something. You have to take something. So I said, okay, I'll take 5%. So I took 5% for booking the dates. We would play somewhere. They came to see Peter, not me. You know, I mean, I do a fine show. I can open for anybody, and I always hold my own. That's not a problem. But the fact is that all the people came and all the people paid to see Peter. Peter demanded that we split the door, you know, and because we were partners on his album, we split that too. So I made twice as much money as he made on those tours, you know. And he would go on a Monkees tour and come off it. I pick him up at the airport in the Dodge Stratus I rented, and then we would like share a hotel room with two beds, and I would drive everywhere. And just, you know, 4 days before, he was getting his guitars carried around, and he was, you know, had a tour book and all this stuff. He was just the best friend I ever had, you know.
Wow. That's so, I was fortunate to get to meet Peter and before a monkey show, I don't know, 8 years ago, 9 years ago
Uh,
or something. And he was so lovely. He was already sick. So now he had the same, he had throat, I know,
Well,
tongue.
he had something called is it called subcutaneous? He had the cancer under his tongue. See, I had mine on the top. He had his
Okay.
under, and they had to literally open his face up and go in under his jaw, and was and it changed the way he started talking a little bit like this, you know, because they'd had to cut his tongue. Anyhow, he fought it for 10 or 11 years, and then I remember he called me in the fall of 2018, and he said, James, this this radiation isotope thing isn't working, so I'm going to stop all the treatment. And I said, well, what does that mean, pal? And he said, that means I hope I make Christmas.
Wow.
And I said, Jesus. So we talked a lot, you know, and Christmas Day, I remember we were talking, and he said, well, I'm shooting for my birthday now, which I think is February the 9th. And I believe he made it to February 19th, or something around then, because maybe I talked to him on the 19th. Sometimes around the 19th or 20th, he passed away, but I talked to him within, 36 hours of his leaving the planet. And I remember he got on the phone, and I said, Peter, what's happening? And he said, I'm just waiting,
Mm.
you know, and then he slipped away. Yeah, that's the crappy part about being 75, is that that all your friends are disappearing, you know.
Well, I'm so glad that you have a different story to tell. And did they
Me too.
really tie what happened to you to HPV that you got when you were a dog?
I got when I was a what?
A dog, when you were a dog, when you
Oh, a
were
dog. Yes,
dogging
yes,
around.
yes, yes. When I was spontaneous and full of reciprocity.
Wow. Well, aren't we lucky that I
Oh, you
wonder
know
if,
what?
did Peter get his the same way? Jesus Christ.
I think that all of us did. You know, I remember, and I was really careful. If anybody had even a hint of something, I would abstain. So I thought I kind of got through the whole thing unscathed, but it turns out, nope. There's no free lunch, Vicky. No
I
free lunch.
literally. Yeah. Wait, you were just going to show me something. You went, oh,
I
and you
was.
start, okay, what do you,
Dan Navarro and I have done a new album. Years ago, I did an album called All Wood and Stones with John Batdorf. I took a bunch
let's
of Rolling
talk about
Stone songs.
how did that original idea come to you to do this?
It was ridiculous. I was at a wedding in Topanga Canyon,
Mhm.
and the groom, who was a friend of mine and knew I was a musician, said, James, go and sing something. And there were two other musicians, George Merrill, who wrote How Will I Know and I Want to Dance with Somebody, and Rod McDonald, who's a wonderful folk singer, topical folk singer. He used to be a journalist for the Times or something. He's really good. Anyhow, the
Wow.
three of us went up on stage. When we got there, we realized that all three of us only sing what we write. So it was like, yeah, what are we going to do? And then Rod started Ruby Tuesday. He said, do you know Ruby Tuesday? And I said, I know the chorus. And he said, okay. So he starts playing it. And George has a really high voice. So George did the high harmony. I did the low harmony. And we sang three-part harmony on Ruby Tuesday.
Wow.
The wedding party went nuts. I mean, it was like Ozzie and Harriet. They came running to the stage, you know. It was so goofy. And on the way home from the wedding, I said, Evelina, I don't think anybody's ever heard the Rolling Stones done, the way I do things, gently and acoustically and harmonies. I said, I'm going to make an album like that. So I made an album called All Wood and Stones with John Batdorf. And Timothy Schmidt sang on it, Paul Barrere and Peter played on it, and Lawrence Jubert from Wing. A bunch of great people played on it.
Right.
And then my pal Gene Vanno was going to have lunch with John Densmore from The Doors, and I had John's book, Riders on the Storm, and I said, Gene, can you take this book to John and just ask him to sign his name? And Gene said, why don't you just come and meet him yourself? And I went, okay, and I went out to lunch and met John Densmore, and I've got my book under my arm, and I go, hi, James Lee Stanley, and I'm thrilled to meet him, hi. And he goes, man, James Lee Stanley, I love what you did to the Stones. Sit down. So I sat down and we became friends. And then during the lunch, he said, if you do the Doors like you did the Stones, I'll play on it. So I did All Wood and Doors, and both John and Robbie Krieger, the guitar player who actually wrote Light My Fire, they both played on it. And the same Zeitgeist Renegades, Timothy Swift from the Eagles, Paul Barrett from Little Feat, Lawrence Schubert from Wings, Peter Tork from the Monkees. Everybody on the record was famous except me. And then John and I did All Wooden Stones too. And then Dan Navarro, who wrote We Belong, the hit for Pat Benatar.
One of my very good friends.
Yeah, and a beautiful man and an unbelievable singer. I'm telling you.
Yes.
He's such a great singer. Anyhow, he came to me and he said, James, I want to do one of those. I want to do Led Zeppelin. And I said, I only know 2 Led Zeppelin songs, Stairway to Heaven and Whole Lot of Love. I said, I don't know the catalog. So he went out and bought the entire catalog, mailed me all the CDs, sent me files. So we decided to do all wood and lead, which I finished. I did what I thought was the final mix the night before my operation because I wanted to get it done because I was afraid if I died, it wouldn't be finished. So
oh my God.
I worked until midnight on like the 7th of November, mixing this album. So I got it all together just in case I didn't make it, except I made it. So then we did some more work on it and we remixed it and it came out a month ago and it's getting spectacular reviews.
I have not heard it yet. I am so excited.
I'm going to mail it to you.
I'm so excited. James, where can people get your music as we're talking about it?
Oh, it's really easy. JamesLeeStanley.com or every single streaming service that exists. Although I don't encourage people to go there because they do such a screw job on musicians,
Yeah.
I mean, literally, I used to get checks every quarter for, and I'm not famous, but I used to get thousands of dollars in the mail every quarter. Since the advent of Spotify and Pandora and like that, I'm getting checks for $100, $110.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
and for just as many plays. But now they're paying you like, 1/2 of a mil for every. It's insane. The problem is that they say they're giving 70% of the profit to artists, but what they're not saying is that they are the ones who decide where the profit line is.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that if $100,000 comes in,
right,
they take $90,000 from it by example. I'm not; these aren't the exact figures.
Of course,
but they take $90,000 to cover their expenses, and then what's left is the profit, $10,000, and then that's what they pay. They call us the content providers, and they pay every musician and recording artist in the world out of the tiny bit that's left after they skim everything off the top.
Yikes!
Yeah, I find them despicable.
So the best place people can go is JamesLeeStanley.com.
That would be nice. Or Apple. Apple pays well still.
I understand that. So James, we've been talking about all wood and doors, stones, lead. Would you play an all wood and something for us now?
Oh, sure.
Great.
Yeah.
I did that without warning, so.
Yeah, I can do it.
I know you can.
Let's swim to the moon. Let's climb through the tide. Or penetrate the evening that the city sleeps too high. Let's swim out tonight, love. It's our turn to try. Park beside the ocean on a moonlight drive, moonlight drive. Let's swim to the moon. Let's climb through the tide. Surrender to the waiting world. The daylight tries to hide. Nothing left open. Nothing to decide. Slip into that river on our moonlight drive. Moonlight drive. Let's swim to the moon. Let's climb through the tide. You reach your hand to hold me, but I cannot be your guide. You say I love you as I watch you glide, falling through the forest on our moonlight drive, moonlight drive. Oh, come on, baby. Come on, take a little ride. Down, down, down by the ocean side. We're gonna get real close, get real close. Yeah, we're gonna get real tight. Down, down, down by the ocean side. Moonlight Ride from The Doors. Oh, why can't I hear you anymore?
Sorry, that was me. I muted myself so
Oh.
I wouldn't disturb your song. I was clapping furiously. I got to see you and Cliff do All Wooden Doors.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Cliff is another great singer. You know, both Cliff and Dan, when I was doing the records, they came to their vocal parts, and then my wife came in the studio and I played her what they sang, and she said, "Ooh, you got your work cut out for you."
Not at all. You are.
No, they're really great singers. Those two guys, you know, just great.
I've actually known Cliff for about almost 40 years. That's kind of crazy too. So you've got these fabulous all wood and lead doors. I'm missing one.
Yep.
Wood.
All wood and stones. All wood and doors, all wood and lead.
Okay.
Yeah, there's 4 in the series. I'm going to do a couple more, I think, just because I really enjoy. I mean, I have done 35 albums and I've written most all the songs for them, and it's just fun to do some stuff that I didn't write because other writers go places that I normally don't go. You know, I mean, we each have our own unique compositional voice. You know.
Absolutely. So for somebody asked, Tony asked, was your voice your first instrument? How did music come to you? How did you come to music?
Yeah, I always sang. There's a photograph of me 2 years old in my underpants sitting on the edge of the stage watching my grandfather play. He could play the mandolin and the banjo and the guitar, and he played the piano like Chico Marx, and he sang, and he was funny, you know.
Wow.
And he had a little band. Whenever there were parties, the band would play, and whenever we got together, they would play. I just always did music. And I know in the 3rd grade, I was the star of the show. I sang the Banana Boat song in the school assembly, and I had a drum made out of one of those Quaker Oats cardboard, you know, containers that are round and cylindrical. Mm-hmm. And so I made that look like a drum, and I wore a little hat, and I sang, you know, I did that. And then I was also the star of the school play. I played Davy Crockett.
All right, then.
Yeah, so I've just always done it, you know, always.
And how about playing guitar? Lessons?
No, I started playing the guitar. I started playing ukulele, actually,
wow.
because I was so little, and my uncle gave me ukulele, and I played it. And then he bought another one, and he actually bought a beautiful baritone Fevilla ukulele, which I have on the wall right over there. I've had it since I was 12 years old.
Oh.
And yeah, I had to have it put back together. It's about $100 ukulele, and I had to spend $300 having them put it back together. But I thought, I don't care. It's, this was the thing that started me. And then when I
Wow.
was 14, I got a guitar, and by the time I was 16, I was, playing. And the Beatles came out, and I mean, I did folk music because that's what was happening. And then the Beatles came out and tore the top of my head off, and you know, they
Before the Beatles, who were your early influences? Who were your folk influences?
all the typical. I mean, I was born in '46, so I kind of missed the Weavers. I know I was aware of their songs because they were huge folk artists in the '50s, but
Mhm.
I wasn't really into music when I was 4 years old, and 5 years old. So in 1960, I met Karen Edwards, and she liked the Kingston Trio, so I started liking the Kingston Trio, and then the Limelighters, and then did the Chad Mitchell Trio, and the Brothers Four, and Bob Dylan, and Joan Baez, and all those folks. Tom Rush. I
Sure.
bought all their recordings and learned all their songs. And by the time I was 18, I was making a living doing music. And
Okay,
then
so doing covers at the beginning, I assume.
yeah, I didn't write any songs then.
And so
Uh,
when did you start writing?
well, I started writing when I was 16 and got a record deal. The guy that produced the records was a man named Frank Guida. He produced Gary U.S. Bonds. I said, hey, hey, hey. Frank wrote that song and produced it. And A Night with Daddy G, and If You Want to Be Happy with Jimmy Soul. He had all these black acts, and my sisters and I. And when because the Beatles came out, he said, "Write me a song, James." So I wrote him some dreadful, awful song, and
Wait, so you were a family act? So when you first were signed, you were a family band?
yeah, my sisters and I sing harmonies. We always sang. We sang in the car, just the way every family does on trips.
Sure.
And I've always had kind of a musical gift in that I actually would sing the parts that I wanted my sisters to sing. Like I would learn the melody, and I say, okay, this is your part, and I would sing her part. I could just always hear the parts, so I just would teach them the parts. So we always sang 3-part harmony. And
Wow.
probably sounded more like the Andrews sisters than anybody else, but then when folk music really got rolling, I didn't want to act with my sisters. I wanted to be a cool guy.
Yeah.
Singing with a 10-year-old girl is not cool, you know. I
So
mean,
how did you branch out on your own?
just well, I got thrown out of high school, so I went down to the beach, got a
Wait,
fake
wait,
ID.
wait, wait. Why did you get thrown out of high school?
I don't know. I was such a nice person. I there were a couple of problems. One was that I moved from Pennsylvania to Virginia when I was 14.
Mhm.
So and also I was 4'11" when I entered high school. So I
What?
was the new kid in town. I was a Yankee, and I was a dwarf. So I got mercilessly teased and harassed by particularly the jocks. I actually did get locked in my locker once. They put me in there. In
Oh,
any event, I didn't get along with people. I didn't like them, and I didn't
I
like the
didn't
teachers.
like them.
I mean, well, I remember in the ninth grade, I walk into the first class. I sit down. The teacher says, "Stanley," and I said, "Here," and he said, "Here what?" And I said, "Uh, here I am." And he goes, "Here I am what?" And I
Hey.
said, "Here I am in class." I'm thinking, what does this asshole want from me? And he said, "You don't say sir at home. Don't you respect your father?" And
Oh,
I said, "Yeah, I respect my father. I respect anybody that earns it." So that kind of set up the dialogue, and
wow.
they just always thought I was a troublemaker. And also the fact that he said I didn't respect my father because I didn't call the teacher sir pissed me off. So I came down on him, and I said, "Yeah, I respect anybody who earns it." And I think that the inference be he hadn't earned it yet.
Right.
And so then they just kept thinking that I was trouble. So no
Mhm.
matter what I said, it was, I mean, I actually got removed for running in the hall, because I was doing it constantly. And mostly because I was being chased by big jocks that wanted to put me in my locker. But in any event,
Did you not
I,
do sports in high school?
I only got my letter because Karen Edwards would only go out with guys that had a letter sweater. So
So you
I
lettered.
went out
What
for
did you
foot.
letter in?
Well, I went out for football, but they said I was too tiny, so I went to soccer and got played soccer, and and
Wow.
nobody came to the games. Not one person came to those games.
But you got a
Anyhow,
letter sweater, so that's all that
yeah,
mattered.
right. And then Karen Edwards didn't want to go out with me anyhow, so it was kind of a waste of time.
Oh, so okay, so you got thrown out of high school, but you did go to college? You
Oh yeah,
did.
well,
Yeah.
when I got thrown out my senior year, in the
Okay.
spring of my senior year. So I went down to the beach, Virginia Beach, with a fake ID. Worked in a bar called the Shadows, and that's where I met Peter Tork and Cass Elliot from the Mamas and Papas, and Dennis Doherty, and John
Wow.
Phillips, and Henry Diltz, and
Wow.
I met everybody. I mean, I met all the people that became famous from the Southern California thing. Jim McGuinn, actually Roger McGuinn. I met them all when I was 16 and 17 in Virginia Beach,
Wow.
and
What were they
and
doing in Virginia Beach?
the Shadows was a folk, really, it was a 600-seat folk club,
Uh-huh.
and so they had all those national acts come through. So I met everybody, and then I just stayed friends with them. When I got to L.A., Cass arranged my first recording session at TTG. She
Wow.
called them. I thought she paid for it, but I realize now she probably just called up and said, "Look, I've got a friend. Give him some time," and they did. So I went down and recorded some songs.
Wow.
In any event, I've just known all these people all that time. Yeah, Henry and I have been friends since 1964,
Wow.
and Peter and I, and I wasn't friends with John, but I was acquainted with John and Michelle. I haven't even, I had dinner with Michelle about, gosh, 15 years ago. I haven't seen her since. Uh, but but Cass, I was friends with, and Leah, her sister, Leah Kunkel. We've been friends since college.
Wow.
So I just was connected to all those people. The sad part was that I was in the Air Force in basic training when I heard Monday on the TV, and I went in the day room at basic training, and there was Cass and Denny and John and Michelle singing that song, and I thought, I'm standing there in an Air Force uniform, and they're on Dick Clark's bandstand, and I thought, I think I may not have thought this through, and
So you enlisted, I'm
I did.
guessing.
Well, I enlisted because everybody, all the men in my family on both sides joined the service first, and I knew that I wanted to go to college.
Mhm.
And so, and we were really poor. There was no chance of anybody paying for anything. So I needed the GI Bill to go to college. So I joined the Air Force. 4 years of Air Force, 4 years of college.
What did you do in the Air Force?
I was a Chinese linguist.
That's right. So do you still speak Chinese?
我说一点中国话，可是我忘了很多。little bit.
Holy shit. You could be a spy. You could have been a Cold
I
War
actually
spy.
contacted the State Department because I love to go to China and do a tour. I mean, I'd have to take a refresher course because I haven't spoken Chinese since I dated Eileen Wan in college.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So you did the Air Force, you came back, you did college. Did you ever have to have jobs, or were you making money with music?
The
What
Air
was that
Force,
like?
before the Air Force, I was a linkman on a surveying team, and I was a draftsman for a surveyor, and I was a musician. And I made most of my money playing music. And then after the Air Force, I came back. I had the GI Bill, and I'd
Mhm.
play around Los Angeles and make a little money. And I also heard about this thing where you could get signed by a publisher, and they'd give you a weekly salary. So so I got signed first to Bones Howe, who produced the Fifth Dimension, and he was the engineer on the Mamas and Papas records. And anyhow, I got signed to his publishing company for a year, and they paid me $50 a week, and they also paid me $10 for every lead sheet that I did. So, and I was writing, 2 or 3 songs a week, so I would turn in $30 worth of songs every week. So I was making, roughly $300 or $400 a month from the publishing, and I was getting the GI Bill, and I was singing. So I never had a job. I always had a nice place to live in a sports car.
How did you learn to write and read music?
Oh,
Where did
well, I went to
In college?
college.
In
Yeah,
college. Okay.
yeah. I studied orchestration and arranging in
Mhm.
college.
So
So
prior to that, you were doing everything by ear?
yes,
Mhm.
yeah. And once I got out of college, I never wrote anything down again.
Really?
Well, I mean, I can play all the instruments and I can hear the parts, so it's faster just to turn on the machine and record them than it is to sit down and write them out and then if somebody wants to learn them, I can write it out for them. But and plus I now work with people that are so good, I don't tell them what to play. Chad Watson, you ever heard him play bass with me?
Chad's played in my living room. Love
Yeah,
Chad.
he's spectacular. I'm not going to tell that guy
Mhm.
what to play. I'm just thankful he wants to play with me. Scott Bredman playing
Fantastic.
percussion, he's fabulous.
Mhm.
And the keyboard players I've had, Michael O'Mardian, John Jarvis, these are world class pianists. So, and Larry Carlton playing lead guitar. What am I going to tell these people?
Fantastic. So James, when did it go from picking up a few dollars here and there to where you were touring and opening for all these incredible people? How did that start for you?
Well, in my junior year of college out at Cal State Northridge,
Mhm.
just as I finished the year, I got a nibble from a record label called Wooden Nickel that was part of RCA, and so I went down and talked to them, and they signed me to a deal. So I didn't go back to college. I didn't finish. I never took my senior year because I thought, well, I can always get a degree, but I'm only going to be a young guy trying to get a record deal now. So I signed with them in, I think, July. I went in the studio in August. And it's so funny. I was in love with this girl, Claudia, my second wife, and she was going to school in Santa Cruz. So I literally went into Beverly Hills to the offices, signed the deal, came home, and rented a truck and moved to Santa Cruz because that's where she was going to school. And I called them and I said, well, I live in, want to hear a funny story about that?
Yes.
I went to rent a truck to move all my stuff from Silver Lake, which is where I lived,
Mhm.
to Santa Cruz. And I said to the guy, I'm going to drive to Santa Cruz. He says, oh, no, you got to reserve a truck like that weeks in advance. I said, oh. So, and my time was up. I had to get out of the house in Silver Lake. So I went to another truck rental and I said, I'm moving. The guy said, where are you moving? I said, Silver Lake to Glendale. He said, okay. So I took the truck, drove back to my house, loaded up everything I owned. My pal Don Dunn, who wrote Hitchcock Railway for Joe Cocker, Don and I loaded my entire house up in this truck, drove
Mhm.
to Santa Cruz, unloaded the truck, slept for an hour, and then drove the truck back because I could only have the truck for one day. And and
Oh
uh,
my
and
God.
on when we woke up in Santa Cruz after sleeping for an hour, Don said, "We're going to need a little bump to stay awake on this drive." So he broke out some toot, and we did a little of that, and we got very festive, and we jumped in the car and we started driving back to Los Angeles. Well, I now had a big empty moving van, and by the time I got to Salinas, I picked up 3 hitchhikers, and then it got to be a thing. So I picked up every single hitchhiker between Santa Cruz and Los Angeles, and I put them in. And back then in Santa Barbara, the 101 turned into surface streets for a while, for like 10 blocks. You were driving with red lights, and there used to be
Mhm.
hundreds of people hitchhiking there because the traffic had to stop. So I was like a vacuum cleaner. I just sucked up every hitchhiker going, "Get in!" I'm yelling, "Get in!" And I had like 25 or 30 people in the back of the truck.
Oh my
Then
God.
we
It's
got back to
crazy.
LA, and I drove them all to where they were going, and then I turned in the truck.
Wow. That's a
That was
ticket
a
to
fun
heaven
day,
right
man.
there.
Yeah.
How'd you get back up to Santa Cruz? Do you have a car?
Oh yeah, I left my car down here.
Mhm.
So I drove that back after I slept some more because I was
Okay,
awake
so
too
now
long.
you're
Oh right.
so now
Eh,
you're in Santa Cruz. How'd you start playing the
Well,
music, making the money?
I went over to the local high schools and I said, I'm a recording artist. And if you'd like me to do a music thing for the kids, I'd be happy to do one, for free, so I did a couple of guitar seminars and a couple of concerts. And, and meanwhile, my record was coming out, and my record president was friends with a guy named Fred Bolander, who happened to have just left Marvin Josephson's big agency, and I forget what it was, huge agency,
Mhm.
and started Monterey Peninsula Artists. So I went down to Monterey and I met Fred, and we hit it off. We've been friends for 50 years. And so for the next 8 years, every time that somebody famous was coming through, I was the opening act. I played all over the
Mhm.
country with all kinds of famous people. And then uh, Bill Graham's people really liked me, and they gave me all kinds of work. That's how I got with Steven Wright. They
So
called
te
up and said, we finally have an act that's perfect for you, you know. And so I became Steven Wright's opening act for 3 years.
Now, what did that mean? You're the perfect opening, because he's a comedian and he's a minimalist. Why was that such a great
Well,
combination?
because I tell on stage, I don't think you've ever seen a real concert of mine. Maybe you have. I know I've done things, but I do a lot of stories,
Yes, you do.
and some of them are kind of outside, you know, stories. And so when I would open for, I mean, he had me opening for Bill Graham, had me opening for all kinds of people, and I always did okay. But when he put me with a comedian, I killed that audience, you know, because I not
Wow.
only sing my ass off and play, but I'm really funny. Probably can't
Yes,
tell
you.
from this interview, but trust me,
Yes, you are. I
you
know
know,
that.
I'm really
Yes.
funny, and so it was a perfect. It was just
Those
a
were your
perfect
people.
storm.
They got you.
Yeah, they really did. You know, and to this day, Steven is another one of the most generous people I've ever worked with. He was fantastic to me, and he has been in a row. Even to do the interview, you know, for the documentary, he did it on his phone because we couldn't get out to Block Island and you know, shoot him with a crew. So anyhow,
So what was it like to open for Bill Cosby? I mean, we didn't know the truth about him back then.
you know,
So
it's
how
interesting.
was he to work with?
He was great to me. The fact that I had a black bass player at the time might have helped because he liked that. You know,
Hmm.
he liked that I was working with somebody of color, and
Hmm.
that I loved. I mean, Terry Morgan is his name. He's from Seattle, and he's a fantastic person, a fantastic bass player, and one of my dear friends. You know, and he could see
Hmm.
that, so I think he liked that. Uh, but also when he got to the gig, Bill Cosby, he got out
Hmm.
of a limo and he had two girls on it, one on each arm, and he walked into the
Of
place
course he did.
with these two girls,
Mhm.
and I knew he was married, so I thought, this is how naive I am. I thought that he had two escorts so that women wouldn't bother him because it looked like he was already taken because he was married and, you know, didn't want to. That's what I thought was going on. It turns out I might have been wrong about that. You know?
You might have been wrong about that.
Yeah, but he was very gracious and put on a great show. You know, so I'm sorry that I'm truly sorry that someone with his gifts didn't didn't have the self worth to or the sense of self worth to
Mhm.
not do what he did. You know, he was Bill
Mhm.
Cosby. He was rich. He was handsome. He was successful. He didn't have to do anything
Mhm.
to have women like him. And because I mean, you know, I'm none of those things, and women have always been wonderfully generous to me. You know, so a matter of
Yeah.
fact, whatever class and style I have achieved, I learned all of that from women. You know, I didn't learn anything worthwhile from guys except guitar. You know, and that from watching people and going, how did he do that? You know, so.
Somebody asked if you have perfect pitch. Who asked
No, I
that?
don't. I have what they call relative pitch. I
What's the
can
difference, James?
well, perfect pitch is that you hear a note and you know flat out, you know absolutely that it's an A or an E. I
Mm-hmm.
can remember where E is. Uh, that's an E.
Hmm.
But uh, relative pitch means that even if you're not A440, whatever wherever you are sonically, I can sing to that. I can keep pitch to whatever tone you happen to choose. But I can't like call it every note. Oh, that's a B. That's a C sharp. You
I
know,
see.
yeah. But they actually people with perfect pitch actually know, and they also are tuned to A440, for instance. And if something is A444 for 444 hertz instead of 440 hertz, it makes it makes them crazy. You know,
S-
that's what
s-
happened to Schumann. You know, he couldn't stop hearing an F sharp. Went nuts.
And so this does not happen to you, which is a nice thing. You don't
No,
go nuts.
it doesn't. I haven't gone nuts yet,
You haven't gone
but it's
nuts.
early. You know.
So I don't want to give away things that are in the documentary that people will hear, but can you give us a couple of chestnuts that perhaps aren't in the documentary, or maybe one that is as a tease?
Yeah, I told a story about how I got the Steven Wright tour,
Love
so I
it.
can tell you that this is in the documentary. Uh, I had gotten back to the United States from Holland,
Hmm.
and there was a call from Bill Graham. I was playing in New Hampshire, and I checked my machine, and Bill Graham had called and said, I got the perfect guy for you to open for if you can be in San Francisco at the Fox Warfield Theater by Tuesday night. Well, I got that message on Monday morning in New Hampshire. So I drove like a maniac to Boston, and I said, I need the next flight to LA.
Mhm.
The next flight to LA happened to be 11 o'clock that night. So I sat around the airport all day, got on that flight, flew to LA, took a cab to my house, picked up my car, sneaked into my apartment, which I had sublet because I was broke. And I took a bunch of LPs and threw them in the car. And then I drove from LA to San Francisco, getting there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I went in and said, where's the dressing room? And I went to sleep for an hour. Then I came out and did a sound check. Then I went back in the room and I turned off the lights and I just played my guitar until they said, you're on. And I went on and did the show. I got a standing ovation. I killed the audience. And I come off stage and I'm feeling pretty good about myself, you know? And there's this bemused, curly-headed guy standing there and he goes, you're brilliant. And I said, well, thank you. Who are you? And he goes, I'm Steven Wright. And I said, oh, well, thanks, thanks for letting me on your show. So then his road manager, who was also his agent, a guy named Lou Viola, came into the room and he said,
Sure.
James, you know Lou?
Well, I know of Lou. Yes.
Oh, okay. So he said, James, Stephen really liked you. We're doing 5 more dates, and we'd like to give them to you. And I thought to I've never, ever been this smart, but I was this time. I knew that I just killed an audience. I was the unannounced opening act, and I got a standing ovation. So I knew that
Wow.
this was my audience, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I can do 1, 2, 3, and 5. I can't do 4. Because I thought if I do 3 dates and this happens 3 more times, I don't care.
Oh,
I don't care who they get as the opening act for the 4th date. When I come back for the 5th date, they're going to give me the tour. And I walked in for that 5th date, and Steven said, "You're my guy." I said, "What happened?" He said, "Some girl turned the audience into a mob." Whoever the opening
wow.
act was, she didn't do great. So they gave me a tour, which lasted.
That was so
3
ballsy of you.
Well, you know what? I was so broke. I was paying my credit cards with credit cards. I owed them
Oh,
30 grand, and I owed them so much money, but I kept paying the minimum that American Express sent me a gold American Express card. And that's how I went to Europe to see Evelina, my wife, because I thought, well, I'm so broke, what the hell? I'm going to Europe and see this woman I love, and then I'll come back home and I'll declare bankruptcy and move in with my parents. That was my big plan.
wow. Well,
So I
how
went
old were you when this was going on?
38.
Wow.
I thought my life was over, you know. But I really wanted. I didn't want to lose Evelina. I thought I have to see her. Or it's just going to go away because we've been separated a year now, you know. So I did that, and then Stephen kept giving me more money. I paid off the credit cards in 4 or 5 months. I paid up completely
Wow.
off, and I've never ever run up a debt. I pay my credit cards every month, no matter what it is. You know, if I have to eat peanut butter and apples for a couple of days, I don't care. But I pay off all my credit cards. You know,
It's a
because
good
it's scary.
practice.
I mean, I still love American Express. I use them a lot, but you know, if you don't pay, the interest is 29.27%. We used to call that usury when we were a Christian nation. You know, isn't that back before
So,
the orange turd took over and ruined everything?
all right. So Evelina, so you met, I know I asked you this question early on. Now I don't remember the answer. You met Evelina how?
I met her at my place. She was Matthew McCauley's au pair.
Right. She was the au pair. And so now you had a thing. And then why were you separated for a year?
Because she was from Holland. She went back
And she
home.
had to go back.
Yeah,
And
she had to go back, and she got she had a nice job there, and she was having a life there, and so I went to see her, and then we kept it up for another year, and then
how'd you convince her to come here?
I didn't. She called me one day and said, "I'm coming to the United States." I said, "Here?" She said, "Yes," and I said, "Oh," I said, "Well, you know what? Let's okay, let's both start saving a lot of money so we can make this transition easy." And she said, "No, no, I'm coming. I'm coming December the 1st." And I said, "Well," or December 10th. I said, well, in that case, don't fly to Los Angeles. I said, you fly to New York City and I'll pick you up and drive you home. So I booked a tour across the country, and uh, and then I picked her up in New York City, and I took her down to D.C. and I took her to New York, and I took her all over the country and took her over to Chicago, and then we drove down the Mississippi River. We stayed at the Maison Dupuis in New Orleans. Then we spent Christmas with my parents, sleeping in separate bedrooms because my parents were raging Christians, and then we drove across the desert to L.A. And then she stayed with me until we got married.
That's a beautiful story.
But
And that
it
was,
was her
yeah.
idea. But I got to tell you, driving her home was so fun because I thought she's from this little tiny country, Holland. She she can't imagine how big because you can drive to Marseille in whatever it is, 8 hours. From. But this was a 3 week trip across America. Great fun.
My daughter is at the Grand Canyon right now. Her and her beau just drove from New York and they'll be here tomorrow. And she's moving back to LA. And the last time
How
you did this
nice.
show with me, she was working the camera and she was about to move to New York to go
Wow.
start
I
college.
remember.
And
What was that? 2 years ago? 3 years ago?
4 years ago,
Was that 4 years ago?
four
Wow.
years ago.
Is
Yep.
that when Sheila was there?
Sheila.
Sheila E. Escovedo?
Oh, no, that's when you did Women Who Write. That was even more years ago. I'm
Oh,
talking about when you did this show, when you did the talk show with me.
oh, oh,
Yes.
that's right. I remember. Yes, she did run the. I
And
remember.
she ran the camera and she was about to go to NYU to go to college. And now she's coming back. And so here we go. We go full circle. So they
And
just
look
did
at
the
this.
cross country trip
And
just
and you
this
and I
week.
haven't changed a bit. We look
We
exactly the same.
haven't changed a bit. But look what you've been through. Okay, so what you went through happened with your tongue just prior to COVID. How much before? Like a year before? How much before?
No,
Not even.
November of 2019 was the operation, and March 13th of 2020 was the last date I did before I couldn't go on the road anymore until they shut us down.
So now, did you have a lot of stuff booked that got canceled?
Yeah, I had a number of things that got canceled, and to tell you the truth, I just canceled my New York dates for October because uh, I talked to the club owners and they said, things are still not really right, and a lot of people are not coming to the shows.
Hmm.
I mean, there's a lady named Christine Lavin who is utterly
I know
brilliant.
who that
If you
is.
don't know,
Mhm.
okay, and she was doing a show, and she always sells out, and they only
Mhm.
had a couple of tickets sold for the show a week before
Wow.
the gig. And he said, you know what, man, I think people are still scared. Can we change your dates to March? And I said, or April. And I said, sure. So I changed those dates to April. And so I didn't, only dates I had this year were September. I played, 4 dates in September of this year.
So let's talk about how COVID impacted your life. So you were on the mend, you were healing anyway. What did you do? How did you and Evelina handle?
I'll tell you the truth. I am so sorry that it happened to this country, but I have never spent so much time at home since high school. I loved it. I really enjoyed being home. I built a long stone. We own a couple of acres up here in this mountain, and
Mhm.
I built a long stone wall on the road for the
Nice.
thing. I planted a dozen pine trees. I built a garden shed for the thing. I learned to make all kinds of dishes, like hummus and tabbouleh, and I just learned to cook all kinds of stuff. I'm really a great cook now. I'm not pretty good. I'm really
Wow.
good. So I learned that. I wrote a whole bunch of songs. I mean, I recorded a bunch of stuff. I made a documentary. I worked on the house. I went on a special immune building diet and lost 35 pounds.
Okay, let's talk about this because I'm still trying to lose all the weight. So what was that? What's that diet? How'd you do it?
Evelina did a lot. She's like the internet maven, and she said there are things that you can do to help rebuild your immune system, because if it wasn't compromised, you wouldn't have gotten this thing. Because everybody
Ah,
has that virus sitting there, but I couldn't fight it off.
wow. Did you, excuse me for interrupting, did you take supplements? Did you eat health? Prior to the illness?
Oh, I've
What
I've
would,
always I've always been a careful eater. I
what
eat
does
fresh
that
food
mean?
and fresh fruit, and I do take vitamins, but not regularly because I don't think your body wants to get all those vitamins every day in pill form. I think that it's better to eat the food and have your body extract it, I think. And this is based upon no knowledge whatsoever. Just
And also your immune system was compromised because you got sick. So we're not
yeah,
listening to you, James.
yeah, okay, yeah. So what I did was
Mhm.
we took all sugar out of my diet. We took all dairy out of my diet, all white carbs, all alcohol, and all meat. So those
Wow.
5 things I took out of my diet for November, December, January, February, March, and April.
What about gluten? Everybody's gluten crazy. Were you
Well,
eating gluten?
white carbs. So I didn't have any bread either. I had no
Even
bread.
even whole, you didn't have whole wheat or anything like
No, I
that.
had no bread
No, no bread.
whatsoever.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. So you
by
took the gluten out.
observing those 5 things for 6 months, I lost 35 pounds, and
Wow.
I went down to like 160, which I thought it wasn't a good look for me. I looked like I was hungry, you know. Uh, so I started. I called the doctor. I said, "Look, I always have martinis on Friday nights, and I've been doing it since I was 21. And how about if can I go back to having martinis?" He said, "Yeah, you can eat whatever you want." So I started having martinis on Friday nights, and I started eating meat when I feel like it. I still don't eat meat very often.
Hmm.
Once or twice a month, I have meat. I mean, but now I have a piece the size of my palm. I can't finish it. And I
Wow.
have gained. I'm now at 175 from 160. Well, 162 I was. So now I'm 175. And I like that weight, and I can get into clothes I've had since college because I don't throw anything away.
So are you, so are you still no sugar,
No, no,
no,
no. No, I
no.
have honey in my coffee. That's another thing is I went to the doctor and I said, how come, I mean, I'm eating handfuls of nuts. I'm eating popcorn at 10 o'clock at night. How come I'm not gaining any of this weight back? And he said,
Hmm?
well, if you can maintain that diet for that long, your body, it's like a computer. It reboots and it resets itself. And it reset itself at this weight, which I've managed to maintain for 2 years.
Wow. So you can eat, I'm sure you don't overdo the nuts and the popcorn though.
I had an entire bowl of popcorn myself last night at 10:30. I eat nuts all the time. But I mean, I eat smaller portions of everything.
Hmm.
I know that when I go out, uh, it's hard to. I mean, when you go to a restaurant, they always get, it's not very good, but there's plenty of it. They always like to, you know.
So when COVID hit, you did all of these great things around the house. All this cooking. Yes, I too cooked more than I ever have in my life, I think. Were you homebound? I mean, you're up there in the country. Did you go to supermarkets? How did you get your groceries? What'd you do?
Well, I started wearing a mask instantly. My
Hmm.
wife bought 2 masks, right? I mean, when I came home on the 13th, they closed it on the 14th or whatever it was. We had masks on Monday, and
Hmm.
uh, and also up here you could go to the market because I'm 75,
Hmm.
or I guess over 70. You could go to the market at like between 7:30 and 9 o'clock. There was nobody in there but you.
Hmm.
I mean, literally, they said old people come and shop in the mornings. So I did that for a while, and I used to wash all the groceries. I mean,
Oh
the
yeah.
canned goods. I mean, I
Mm.
literally was like.
Yes.
And then I got my vaccines, which I wholeheartedly believe in. I think that anyone who is against vaccines is an absolute idiot.
Hmm.
The fact is that those vaccines, they didn't just decide to do them on Tuesday and hand them to us on Friday. They have been working on vaccines for all these viruses for
Hmm.
decades. Talk
Hmm.
to any real scientist, and they'll tell you that they didn't. They may have adapted a little bit, but they already had vaccines that were not going to turn your child into a encephalitic idiot. So anyhow, I took the vaccines, and I'm
Hmm.
careful. I still wear a mask when I go out. I wash my hands all the time, and
Washing hands is so important.
it is.
It
It is
is.
because you know what? Also, people think that biting their fingers is how they get it. That's not actually it. It turns out that you have a lot of enzymes and stuff in your saliva that
Hmm?
that will protect you from a lot of stuff. But people touch their eyes,
Right.
and there's nothing except
To
lubricant
protect.
in your
Hmm.
eyes. So
Hmm.
you can put anything in in your system by touching your eyes. So washing your hands really keeps that down. I mean, you'll notice that the flu season for the past 2 years has not been like it was because everybody was
Absolutely.
wearing a mask and washing their hands.
And
Think of
also not interacting very much.
yeah, yeah, that yeah.
So what does your life look like now, James? Do you go to restaurant? What are you doing now?
I go to restaurants. I go to the market when I feel like it. I have I get together with some guys and play music every week. We have a kind of a dining club once a month. We get together, but uh, everybody is masked, vaccinated, and liberal. You know what I mean? The fact of the matter is, I don't interact with any Republicans. Okay,
Yeah. Yes. Well,
I
that
think
you know of.
well, it's pretty easy to tell. Or a Republican. They have that vacant stare.
Do you eat indoors at restaurants? Because I haven't done that yet. I'm
Yeah,
not doing that.
I do.
Yeah.
But the restaurants, there's a lot of social distancing in the restaurants.
Mhm.
Yeah, but
And so,
I played the Sculptura Vineyard on Sunday, huge crowd of people outdoors, and I didn't wear a mask because you can't sing with them. I mean, I guess you could, but
hmm.
I didn't sing with a mask on. And then I did sell some CDs without wearing a mask. Now I think about it, but I washed myself. I also have a spray that I put on my face.
What kind of
Uh,
spray on your face?
Something Evelina got me. It smells like cedar, and it's all this disinfectant stuff, and I just spray it because it hits my nose and my beard, and I thought maybe it discourages anybody, any little
Boogers. Well, not
boogers.
boogers, but
Yeah,
yeah, those
little
things, bad
walking
things.
boogers.
So, and have you done indoor gigs since you've started playing again?
Yes, I played in Ojai at the Underground Exchange, a wonderful club that Bernie Larson runs. Bernie used to be the guitar player in El Rayo X with David Lindley, and he and his wife Cassidy have a great room there. And I played, and every single person in the audience was wearing a mask. You
Cool.
know,
Yeah, but then
and
what happened? But then they have a drink or they have food, and then
well, there actually was no food.
mm,
It was just a concert hall, and they didn't because of COVID, they didn't sell anything like that.
ah,
I mean, they usually have wine and beer and stuff, but they didn't. They didn't sell anything, as I recall. And they all wore
cool.
masks.
All right, well, good. So do you have stuff lined up? I know you're not going to New York till later, but
Yeah, I'm playing the Tehachapi Apple Festival. It happens every year. I'm playing that on the Saturday the 16th, and then I am going to Illinois in November and playing some dates. And I'm also there's a kind of a songwriting camp that happens up here
mhm.
the first weekend in November, and I'm on the staff there. I'll be teaching people how to orchestrate songs and how to write songs, and I guess I'll be wearing a mask. So I'm still doing stuff, but I have nothing else after that for the rest of the year. Dan and I are going out in January and promote All Wood and Lead, and then I have dates that are starting to fill in, next year. But that also may change, you know.
Yeah, we're subject to change, I guess. How about
Yeah.
playing? Before we go, can you play us something from All Wood and Lead and give us a
Oh, I
little
can't.
taste? You
Uh,
can't.
no, I did the record. I played everything before the operation in November of 2019, and I
Mhm.
haven't actually played anything. Dan and I are going to get together in January and work up the stuff, but I can't even remember any of the songs. I mean,
Yeah, well, because you weren't. I'm not a Zeppelin. I wasn't a Zeppelin
no,
person.
no, and
Yeah.
actually, yeah. I mean, I literally, you won't recognize even one of those songs as a Led Zeppelin song. They sound because I didn't know their catalog, and I just listened once, and I just thought, I'm just going to do what I want, and I'll use their words. So that's what I did, and
I,
roughly
l-
their melodies.
well, you do that with all of it. Well, so play anything. Tell us what it is, and play whatever pleases you.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I wrote a musical called "Straight from the Heart" that my sister starred in. Great singer. This is a song called When Love Comes Knocking Around. I think I might have played it for you before.
You have.
When love comes knocking around, when love comes knocking around, you better be there. When love comes knocking around. When love comes knocking around, when love comes knocking around, you better be there rocking. When love comes a knocking, when love comes knocking around, like a child that I wishing well, you've been wishing with all your might for a charm that can break the spell that's been keeping your heart locked up so tight. When love comes knocking around, when love comes knocking around, you better be there rocking. When love comes a knocking, when love comes knocking around. Who can say what life holds in store? 'Cause that's a secret no one knows. But the joy we're creating for is the key that can open any door. Oh, when love comes knocking around, when love comes knocking around and around, you better be there rocking. When love comes a knocking, when love comes around. It's time to begin again. So close your eyes, count to 10. Kick the can, holly oxen free. Be as ready you can be. When love comes around, when love comes around, yeah, you better be there rocking. When love comes a knocking, when love comes around, yeah, you better be there rocking. You better be there. No, don't you be out walking around and around, round and around and around. When love comes knocking around.
That is a gorgeous song. That is a
Thank you.
gorgeous song. And someone just said, I hope I can find it on Spotify, but we don't want you to buy it on get it on Spotify.
Oh, you know what? As long as they listen to it, I guess that's the important thing. You know, and I got to say, Vicki, you are more beautiful than ever. It's just amazing. I was looking at you while I was singing. I was thinking, how in the world does she do it? You must have like a painting in the attic, you know?
Yeah, well, I have really good lighting and a lot of filters, and
Oh
it's
yeah. Well,
all it's all
it's working for you, baby. It's working for you.
the pandemic's been very good for aging because you can manipulate the shit out of it. James, I adore you. And, I was looking, this has been going on. We've been doing stuff together for over a decade.
Yeah. It's true.
And it's just been, you just get better and better. Your voice sounds is good, if not better than ever, which
I'm really
I'm
blessed.
so
I'm really
thrilled
blessed.
about. And you look fantastic. There's absolutely no sign there's been anything going on. I'm so grateful and happy
Me
to
too.
see
I
that.
feel like I'm so lucky, you know? And it was, if Evelina had not said, get an endoscopy, God knows what would
Wow.
have happened. you
How
know?
long did it take between the endoscopy and you starting to feel something was wrong?
Oh, about 18 hours.
Oh,
Yeah, I literally called the guy that did the endoscopy. I said, "Hey, I don't know what you did, but you messed up my throat. It's burning. I'm having a hard time swallowing." He said, "I didn't do anything." I said, "Look, something is wrong.
mhm.
You must have banged into something when you put the camera down my throat." He said, "No, no, we're so careful. We didn't do anything." And I said, "Well, something's wrong." So I went to another doctor, and then I had to call the first doctor back and say, "You know what? You didn't do anything wrong. Turns out I've got a lump of cancer on my tongue." You know?
Holy shit. Well, thank God Evelina had that
Yeah.
premonition.
You know what else though, Vicky? I never ever embraced the victim thing, the poor me thing, the why me. I never went through any of those things. What I decided was I would try to get rid of it, and if it didn't work, I would die. Either way, I was
Wow.
okay with it. But there was no. I just didn't go through a thing with it. I think that my
Why do you
attitude
think
really
that
helped.
is? Yeah,
I don't. Well, you know what? When they were rolling me into the theater, I hadn't had the anesthesia yet,
mhm.
and I was thinking, well, I wonder if this is it. I mean, sometimes they open people up and they go, "Mother of God, he's riddled with cancer. Just sew him up and send him home." So there was that, or else they're cutting something. Oops, cut his what is it? Carotid artery. Sorry. Oops. I mean, anything can go wrong and you die. So I thought this might be it, but wow, I've had a pretty great life. I mean,
Oh,
I can't complain, and so so I don't know. I think that attitude really helped.
I think it did. And also the fact that you had this goal to play that show just a couple of months later probably speeded up your recovery. It sounds like.
Well, that helped get my voice back. Yeah, because I thought I want to do this show. I mean, I couldn't even sing at all until about the second week of December. I mean, I didn't have any solid. I had like a feeding tube for I don't know 8 or 10 days, and then these little mushy packets they gave us. It was caca. Terrible.
Mm.
So I didn't really eat until Thanksgiving was my first actual meal, and it was hard to swallow.
I can remember seeing you, I guess it must have been online. It must have been because I don't think I saw you in person in that time. But I know that when I first saw you after your surgery and you were too skinny and your voice sounded a little concerning.
Yeah,
And you're a miracle. You're an absolute miracle,
I'm a lucky dude.
a
That's
sight
for
to
sure.
behold and to hear.
Well, thanks for having me. I love doing this. I'm always available for you. You know that.
I love that, James. And you stepped in very much at the last minute on a cancellation, and I'm so grateful. And you were on my list to call anyway, so I'm glad it was speeded up. Okay, so tell everybody the name of the documentary, how
Oh
they can
yes.
find all your music, and let's give them one
Everything
more
is on my
go.
website, www.jamesleestanley.com. The documentary is called The Opening Act, The Extraordinary Journey of James Lee Stanley. The new album, the new duet album with Dan Navarro is called All Wood and Lead, and there is, in fact, an allwoodandlead.com page. And my last solo album is called Without Susie, but all 35 of my albums are available on my website and on all the streaming services that exist. And I
Fantastic.
also have a blog called Data Musicata. You don't have to sign up for it. There's no anything. You just go in there and get it. There's a search engine, and I've written about 700 articles, and it's just everything that I can think of that might help you follow your own artistic muse. It's Data
Wow.
Musicata,
Spell it
DATA
for us.
Music ATA, Data Music ATA, datamusicata.com. And just yeah, there's like everything I could think of that could possibly help you is there, and it's free.
Fantastic. Thank you
Okay.
so much, James. I adore you. I
I
can't
adore your
wait
back.
to hear the album and to see you and Dan play it will be thrilling. And
He's a
stay
great
healthy.
singer.
He is a great singer. He
Yeah.
is a great singer. And
Okay. I
I'll
love
see
you.
you
Bye.
soon. Love you. Bye. Thanks again.